I would like to start off. This is not a reading this evening. It's just simply talk, and then we'll have a Q&A. But I'd like to start off, if I may, to read something from the book to set the mood. Um, and I'll set the scene was in the 1960s when Bobby Fischer was going to go to Argentina, to Mar del Plata, to play in a big international tournament. And so here we go. A week before he left for Argentina, Bobby and the author of this book had dinner at the Cedar Tavern in Greenwich Village, hangout of avant-garde artists and abstract expressionists, and one of Bobby's favorite eating places. The night we were there, Jackson Pollock and Franz Klein were having a conversation at the bar, and Andy Warhol and John Cage dined at a nearby table. Not that Bobby noticed. He just liked the pub food the restaurant served. It was a shepherd's pie kind of place, and the anonymity that came from sitting among people who preferred gawking at art celebrities rather than taking note of chess prodigies. We slid into the third booth from the bar and ordered bottles of beer, Lowenbrau for Bobby, Heineken for me. The waitress didn't question Bobby's age, even though he had just turned 17 and wasn't legally old enough to drink in New York State. 18, as you remember, some of you were old enough to remember, was the limit at that time. But he looked like he was 18. Bobby knew the selection without looking at the menu. He tackled an enormous slab of roast prime rib, which he consumed in a matter of minutes. It was if he were a heavyweight boxer enjoying his last meal before the big fight. He just received in the mail his pairings chart. He didn't like it, and so forth. During a lull in the conversation, lulls were typical while spending time with Bobby, since he didn't talk much and wasn't embarrassed by long silences. I asked, Bobby, how are you going to prepare for this tournament? I've always wanted to know how you did it. He seemed unusually chipper and became interested in my interest. Here, I'll show you, he said, smiling. He then slid out of his side of the booth and sat next to me, cramming me into the corner. Next, he retrieved from his coat his battered pocket chess set, all the little pieces lined up in their respective slots, ready to go to war. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those, but they're hardly larger than an index card. As he talked, he looked from me to the pocket set, back and forth, at least at first, and spat out a scholarly treatise on his method of preparation. He said, first of all, I'll look at all the games that I can find of all the players, but I'm only going to really prepare for Bronstein. Spassky and Olafson I'm not that worried about. He then showed me the progression of his one and only game with Bronstein, a draw from Potero's Yugoslavia 2 years earlier. He took me through each move that the two had made, disparaging a Bronstein choice, one moment, lauding another the next. The variety of choices Bobby worked through was dazzling and overwhelming. In the course of his rapid analysis, he discussed the ramifications of certain variations and tactics, why each would be advisable or not. It was like watching a movie with a voiceover narration, but with one great difference. He was manipulating the pieces and speaking so rapidly that it was difficult to connect the moves with his commentary. I just couldn't follow the tumble of ideas behind the real and phantom attacks, the shadow assaults. He said he couldn't play there since it would weaken his black squares. I didn't think of this. No, was he kidding? The slots on Bobby's pocket set were so worn and enlarged from thousands of games that the little half-inch pieces almost fell into the slots kinesthetically at his will. And all of the images were worn off, I might say. Then he went on and discussed Bronstein's style. At one point he said, asked me, did you read Bronstein's book? I said, no, isn't it in Russian? And he looked annoyed and amazed that I didn't know the language. Well, learn it, he said. It's a fantastic book. He'll play for a win against me, I'm sure, and I'm not playing for a draw. Resetting the pieces in seconds, Again, almost without looking, he said, he's hard to prepare for because he can play any kind of game, positional or tactical, or any kind of opening. He then began to show me from memory, game after game, it looked like dozens, focusing on the openings that Bronstein had played against Bobby's favorite variations. Multiple outcomes leaped from his mind. But he didn't just confine himself to Bronstein's efforts. He also took me on a tour of games that Louis Paulsen had played in the 1800s and Aaron Nimzovich had experimented with in the 1920s, as well as others that had been played just weeks before, and games that he had gleaned from a Russian newspaper. All the time, Bobby weighed possibilities, suggested alternatives, selected the best lines, discriminated, decided. It was a history lesson and a chess tutorial. But mainly it was an amazing feat of memory. His eyes, slightly glazed, were now fixed on the pocket set, which he gently held open in his left hand, talking to himself, totally unaware of my presence or that he was in a restaurant. His intensity seemed even greater than when he was playing in a tournament. His fingers sped by in a blur, and his face showed the slightest of smiles, as if he was in a reverie. He whispered, barely audibly, well, if he plays that, I can block his bishop. And then, raising his voice so loud that some of the customers stared, he won't play that! I began to weep quietly, aware that in that time-suspended moment, I was in the presence of genius. Thank you. Okay. Some of the things we're going to do here is I'll talk, we'll have a Q&A. There is a microphone man over here from C-SPAN. C-SPAN is filming this for a future broadcast. And if you have a question, don't yell it out. Let the microphone man come over so it gets picked up on the TV, on the camera, okay? I was attempting to do a number of things when I began to write this biography of Bobby Fischer. And let me tell you, if those of you are here who do not know how to play chess at all, or poor players, you can read this book without knowing, okay? This is not a chess book, it's a biography. And of course, it's of great interest, I would hope, to chess players, but you don't necessarily have to know the game very well in order to enjoy it. I had written a number of other biographies, as the man said, and from Orson Welles to Aristotle Onassis, and I approached Bobby's life in the same way as a biographer, sort of a microscopic look at his life, and I attempted to leave no fact behind. I mean, that's the way I approach all of my books. I want to know every fact, every trivial fact, okay? I may not use it, but it gives me confidence that I know my subject, and I may use it somewhere along the line. And, there was no library unvisited. There was no archive that or no research that was unexamined on my part. And in addition to approaching this as a biographer, researcher, I was also an official witness to and a participant in Bobby's career. I was the director of one of the first tournaments he ever played as a child at Asbury Park, New Jersey, at the old Monterey Hotel that doesn't exist anymore, right on the boardwalk there. And Bobby was, 10 or 11, whatever he was, and his mother was with him. And I didn't talk to Bobby at that time, but I noticed him, and he was a magnet for people because he was so tiny. He was the youngest person playing in the tournament, and everybody gathered around and watched him. And I noted, who knew that he was going to become what he became, but I noted how serious he was. He really took his time. He really concentrated. It was really great. We also Bobby and I played in some of the same tournaments together over the years. We never met in an official tournament game. By the way, we were light years away in terms of, he was in another universe in terms of ability, okay?